This boy is a human-eating monster. When his mother was pregnant, she tried to offer herself to a monster, but they ran away due to the cursed child in her stomach. She couldn't bear the thought of birthing a cursed child, so she hung herself on a tree, but the baby crept out of her stomach and was born. The villagers were scared of him, and his father also left him to survive on his own. Now 9 years old, he is often ignored by the villagers. One day, 2 men from the village go hunting and see him. They spit on the snow and call him cursed. As they enter the forest, one of them excuses himself to take a dump, so the other waits for him. After waiting for a long time, the man wasn't back, so his friend went in search of him, but couldn't find him. When he looks up at one of the trees, he sees his friend dead. The villagers are weeping over the body of the dead man. They are always living in fear of monsters eating them. One of the villagers suspects that the boy was behind the numerous deaths in the village. When the girl hears this, she goes to look for the boy. The boy doesn't know what is happening. He is trying to eat his food when the girl approaches him and starts to beat him. She accuses him of killing her father, but the boy doesn't say anything. When she falls from chasing him, he goes back to help her up and clean her tears. Then he ran far away from the village to sleep in a cave. He remembers the girl's words and wonders if he had attracted the monsters to eat the villagers. He covers himself to sleep, but he's scared because he keeps hearing the sound of monsters coming. Meanwhile, a woman with a red veil walks over to the site where the villager was eaten by the monster. She studies the tree and discovers some claw marks on the tree. That night, after caring for her sick mother, Yonji goes to pour out water and hears a growling sound. Her junior sister tells her there's something outside, but she dismisses it as nothing. Soon after, a loud noise is heard from their house. The following day, villagers troop in to see the dead body of Yonji and her family. Some mourn the deceased family, while others are scared for their lives. An old seer comes out of the crowd and claims that the boy is behind the death occurring in the village. According to her, the Bulgasal is searching for the boy and will continue to knock at every villager's door until it finds the boy. Her words bring fear to the villagers, so some men decide to kill the boy. The boy sees the villagers searching for him and begins to run. They chase him until he gets to a snow lake, so they stop their chase. To escape from the villagers, he continues walking on the lake. The lake cracks, and he falls in. As he falls deeper into the lake, someone jumps in to save him. He wakes up to find himself in a cave. He walks out and sees the woman who had saved him. But he's unlucky because the villagers find him again and begin to chase him. This time, they catch and surround him. As one of the men raises a sword to kill him, a woman comes in between and takes the stab for him. He's heartbroken to see her die, so he picks up a stick to fight off the villagers. But they overpower him. They try to kill him again, but some soldiers returning from war interrupt them. General Dan sees the situation and orders the villagers to drop their weapons. He asks them their reason for trying to kill the boy. The old seer comes out and tells him that the boy is under the curse of a Bulgasal. They need to kill him to put an end to bad luck surrounding the village. She begs the general to let them kill the boy. But the general finds the whole thing ridiculous. So, he threatens to behead anyone who tries to kill the boy. He asks the boy about his name. But the boy has no name, so he names him H-Wall. He reaches out his hand to the boy and pulls him on his horse. As he leaves the village, the old seer warns him and says he'll regret his actions. He'll be sucked into the boy's bad karma. But the general laughs at her words. 17 years later, General Dan is ready to retire from the army, but he needs someone to take over his position. So he recommends H-Wall to the king's official. He praises H-Wall for his multiple war achievements and concludes he's the best man to take over as the military leader. Before retiring, the general takes his men on a mission to find and kill the last monster in the kingdom. While searching the forest, one of the soldiers finds a young girl and approaches to help her. But she takes control of his mind and makes him fight his fellow soldiers. Little by little, half of the soldiers lose their minds and begin to fight one another. H-Wall shoots an arrow at the girl and also saves the general from a possessed soldier. Everyone thinks the girl has died, but she changes into her true monster form, so H-Wall runs to fight it. They engage in a fierce fight, but H-Wall ends up overpowering the monster. As he raises his sword to kill it off, the monster promises to remember H-Wall's soul. It says it'll reincarnate and get revenge. H-Wall ignores the threats and stabs his sword into the monster. The soldiers celebrate his victory, but that night, some of the soldiers speculate about his identity. The second in command is jealous that H-Wall will become the new general, and he cannot accept the thought of bowing to H-Wall. Meanwhile, H-Wall is cleaning his battle wounds. The general complains that no one is around to help clean the wounds. But H-Wall doesn't want to get help from the soldiers because some of them see him as a monster. The general sees him deep in thought and wants to know what's on his mind. H-Wall reveals he's worried that all the monsters he had killed would taunt him in the next life. But the general tells him not to worry and assures him that he'll be present with him in the next life. Now that they had killed all the monsters in the kingdom, H-Wall shifts his focus to the Bulgasal. The general tries to convince him that the Bulgasal does not exist, but H-Wall remembers that the old seer had said the curse would not end until he dies. The general receives news from his house, so they decide to return home. At home, the general's daughter, who's also H-Wall's wife, had delivered, but it was a stillbirth. The woman blames her misfortune on H-Wall's curse, but the general ignores her and goes to bury the child. H-Wall volunteers to do it. As he looks over the grave of his newborn, his blind son comes over to meet him. Seeing the boy's bleeding eyes, he remembers the Bulgasal curse. The old seer had told him that anyone who stayed with him would bleed from the eyes. He feels heartbroken and pity for his son. When he returns home, his wife tries to kill him. She accuses him of laying a curse on their son. In the process of stopping her, the sword cut his hand and made him bleed. He also accuses her of being cursed. When he holds her hands tightly, his touch makes her see a vision of his childhood experience. He informs her that he plans to go on a journey to break the curse and intends to take their son on the journey. The next day, he sets out on the journey with his wife, son, and some soldiers. He visits his former village and sees the villagers beating up a small boy. They accused him of stealing from them and were planning to sacrifice him to Bulgasal. He tries to stop them, but the people riot against him. Suddenly, the old seer appears and announces to everyone that H-Wall is the cursed boy. The soldiers ignore her and set into the forest to find the Bulgasal. The villagers begin to fight them. In the middle of the battle, H-Wall sees a strange woman and goes after her. When he catches up to her, he's shocked to discover she's the same woman who had taken the stab for people. He wonders why she's still alive and suddenly realizes she's the Bulgasal but hesitates to kill her. The soldier shoots an arrow at her, but he blocks it with his body. When the soldiers get to him, he turns around and finds out the woman has disappeared. He returns to the camp and overhears his son complaining about their distant father-son relationship. The boy thinks his father hates him because of his bleeding eyes. H-Wall feels bad about the misunderstanding and heads into the forest alone. He's determined to kill the Bulgasal in order to put an end to the curse on his son. As soon as he leaves the camp, the soldiers are attacked by the Bulgasal. The mother and son duo hide from the monster, but it gets closer to their hiding spot, so they decide to escape from the camp and hide in the forest. H-Wall returns to the camp and sees the chaos. He looks around for his wife and son but can't find them, so he goes into the forest to search for them. The mother and son are running away from the monster, but it finds them, so the mother tells her son to escape and find H-Wall while she tries to buy time with the monster. But the monster catches the two of them and kills them. H-Wall arrives to see the dead bodies of his wife and son. He breaks down in tears while hugging his son. As he mourns his family, the woman stabs him from behind, and his soul sips into her hand in the form of blood. He loses his soul to her and becomes a Bulgasal. Since she had killed his family, he turned to her and stabbed his sword into her shoulder. He questions her for killing his family, and she responds that it was all his fault and that his bad karma had caused everything. She tells him she'll reincarnate again with the scar from the sword wound, and then she fades away. The soldiers find him and ask how he had killed the monster, but he ignores them and pulls out the sword on his chest. He goes to carry his son, but when he sees the blood on the boy's body, he's tempted to eat the boy. The soldiers realize he had become a Bulgasal, so they all stab their swords into his back in an effort to kill him, but he doesn't die. The soldiers return to report the situation to General Dan. He's devastated and worried about the body of his daughter and grandson. The king orders H-Wall to be killed or trapped in a well, so the general volunteers lead the operation. The soldiers and the general set out to the forest again, but there's no trace of H-Wall. Meanwhile, H-Wall secretly meets up with the general. The general asks to confirm if he has become a monster and if he was behind the death of his wife and son. H-Wall goes on his knees and begs the general to kill him. He confesses that he had tried multiple ways to kill himself but had failed. He had indeed become an immortal monster. The general decides to cut him into pieces and seal his body in a well. For the last time, he asks if H-Wall had personally killed his daughter and grandson. H-Wall responds that he didn't do it, but he also admits that he was indirectly responsible for their death. He had taken them on a journey to break the curse, but instead, they lost their lives. Hearing this, the general refuses to kill him and advises him to escape and go into hiding. While leaving, the second-in-command confronts the general for not killing H-Wall. He stabs the general with a sword for disobeying the royal order. H-Wall sees this and transforms into a monster. He attacks the soldier, but when he's about to kill the soldier, the general stops him and tells him not to let his monster instincts win over him. He carries the general to a field to recover from the sword wound. But when he sees the blood on the general, he resists his desire to eat flesh. The general sees this and becomes worried, so he makes H-Wall promise never to eat human flesh. After making sure that H-Wall makes the promise, the general dies. H-Wall becomes heartbroken. The general was the only one who had shown him love. As he buries the general on a mountain, the old seer appears and bows to him. He becomes curious and asks how he had become a monster, so the old seer explains that a Bulgasal has no soul. The former Bulgasal had taken his soul and made herself human, and since he had no soul, he became the new Bulgasal. The old seer also tells him that since the woman has stolen his soul and become human, she would reincarnate. Hearing this, H-Wall vows to wait for her and take his revenge on her for killing his family. He spends hundreds of years in a cave. Since he can't fight the desire to eat human flesh, he begins to live on animal blood. He's also determined to find the woman, so he makes a drawing of her and hangs it on a stick for passers-by to identify her. One day, a man approaches him and reveals he has seen a picture of the woman somewhere. He introduced H-Wall to the old man, who also had a portrait of the woman. The old man takes H-Wall to his lair and proudly shows off his drawing of the woman. When H-Wall asks about her whereabouts, the old man reveals he has already killed her. When he saw her, he felt the urge to kill her. The old man also reveals that someone else with a dark hole in his chest had also come to look for the girl. There were a lot of people who wanted her dead. At that moment, H-Wall realizes that the old man is the reincarnation of a monster he has killed. They had promised to take revenge on him when they reincarnated. And the moment they smell his soul in the girl's body, they feel the urge to kill her. H-Wall begins to fight the monster. The monster tries to kill him but soon realizes that H-Wall is a Bulgasal, so he tries to eat H-Wall's flesh in order to turn into a Bulgasal. But H-Wall overpowers him. He warns the monster to stay away from the woman in the next life before killing him. Now that the woman is dead, he has to wait hundreds for her next reincarnation. It's now 2006, H-Wall meets up with a private detective and gives him a picture of the woman. He's still searching for her after years. Meanwhile, a young high school girl named Sang-un is having lunch with her friends. She complains that a car keeps following her, but her friends laugh it off. They ask about her twin sister, and she reveals that her sister keeps acting weird. She tells her friends that her twin had advised her to run away from any stranger who tries to talk to her. After lunch, she trekked home, but the car kept following her. When she returns home, she tells her twin sister about the experience. The twin sister, Sang-yeon, becomes paranoid and asks her to describe the features of the driver. Sang-un reveals that the man was wearing a hoodie and had asked to see her shoulder. When Sang-yeon hears this, she begins to cry. The two twins were the reincarnated soul of the woman. But their souls were split, and only Sang-yeon remembered the past. When their mother returns home, she only finds her youngest daughter at home because the twins have run away. Sang-yeon manages to convince Sang-un to run away with her. They get on a bus, but suddenly, Sang-un complains that her hands feel shaky. Sang-yeon gets suspicious and looks around the bus. She discovers that the bus driver is one of the monsters after their soul. They get off the bus and begin to run, but the monster chases them. Sang-yeon tells him to back off, but he pushes her aside and goes to smell Sang-un. Although they're twins, he can only smell the soul of Sang-un. Sang-yeon pulls out a dagger and puts it close to his neck. She threatens to kill him, but some policemen arrive at the scene and capture the man. The two girls find safety in a room. Sang-yeon reveals to her sister that the bus driver is a monster who is after their soul. Sang-un suggests reporting the case to the police, but Yeon thinks it's useless. She tells her sister that they need to hide from a more frightening monster named Bulgasal. Sang-un finds everything ridiculous and pulls out her phone to call their mother. But Yeon stops her and says they'll both die if they're found. In the bathroom, Yeon looks at herself in the mirror and sees the scar from Hwal's sword wound. She remembers how the day he had stabbed her and is determined to escape from him. The next day, Yeon takes her sister to a house and knocks on the gate. Go-bun opens the door and is shocked to see Yeon. She hugs the girl and welcomes them into her home. Inside, Sang-un eats lunch while Yeon catches up on old times with the woman. After discussing with the woman, Yeon comes out and informs Sang-un that she has somewhere to go. She begged Sang-un to stay with the Go-bun for a while. She also warns Sang-un not to call their mother. If they're discovered by the monsters, they could die. When Sang-un asks where she's going, Yeon reveals that she is going to find the sword that can kill the Bulgasal. She tells her sister goodbye and leaves. But that night, Sang-un woke up and sneaked out of the house to call her mother. She tells her mother she can't return home because of the sister's warning, but the mother convinces her to give out her location. She decides to sneak out of the house to meet her mother, but Go-bun wakes up and tries to stop her. Sang-un pushed the woman down and ran out of the house. She meets up with her mother in a bus terminal, and they hug each other. The mother drives her home, but as they climb the stairs, Yeon appears from nowhere and stops them. She insists on running and hiding with Sang-un, but their mother tells her not to worry. Yeon pushes the woman away and reveals that she's not the woman's daughter. She advises the woman to run away, so they get inside their house and lock the door. They can hear the sound of a monster approaching, so Yeon tries to find a means of escape. She begins to break down the walls of the house. The monster is nearby, and its strong presence causes the bulbs to go off. The mother begins to panic and calls the police. When Yeon finds out that the wall leads to a dead end, she advises their mother to escape with Sang-un while she tries to buy some time with the monster. But the mother rejects this plan. She tells the two girls to hide in the wardrobe while she volunteers to sacrifice herself to the monster. Yeon quickly hides Sang-un in the wardrobe. But before leaving, she tells her sister never to trust anyone. She also instructs her sister to find a sword that can kill the Bulgasal. She tells her sister how to find the sword, but Sang-un is overwhelmed with fear, so she doesn't hear the last sentence on how to find the sword. Yeon locks the wardrobe and goes to meet the monster. The monster enters the room and kills both Yeon and their mother. Sang-un hides until the sound dies down. Then she comes out of the wardrobe and sees a man standing in front of her bleeding sister. She picks up a knife to fight the man, but he pushes her away and leaves. The following day, the police visit the scene and discover that Sang-un is still alive, but her sister and mother had died in the attack. At the hospital, Detective Kwon questions her. The detective is a reincarnation of General Dan. After the police leave, she cries to herself while remembering the words of her sister. She decides to leave the hospital and visit the Go-bun's house with her junior sister. The woman gladly accepts them. After a few days, Hwal comes to visit, but a neighbor reveals that the woman had run away with the two girls in the middle of the night. 15 years later, Sang-un now works in a laundry factory. That day, she finishes her shift early and visits her old home to honor their death anniversary. She looks around the room and remembers the events of the night she lost her sister. She regrets not listening to her sister and apologizes in tears. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door. Someone is trying to open the door. It's Hwal. He was around the area and had heard some movements in the room. He finally forces the door open but finds no one inside. It turns out that Sang-un had escaped through an opening on the wall. He goes out to look for her around the building, but some policemen find him suspicious and request an ID. He complies and gives it to them, but they discover that he looks too young for the age on the ID. Before they could question him, he had disappeared. Meanwhile, Sang-un manages to escape. She gets home safely and calls her junior sister. When the call goes through, she instructs her sister to return home immediately, but the sister refuses and claims to be on a date with her boyfriend. Hwal gets home and calls all his private detectives for updates on the girl, but they do not know her whereabouts. He's still determined to get his revenge on her. Sang-un is restless and scared, so she goes through her late sister's diary to get clues on how to find the sword that could kill the Bulgasal. She then visits an antique and asks if they had received any new swords. The owner shows her a sword, but she doesn't recognize it or feel anything towards it. She remembers her sister telling her she'll feel something once she finds the sword. On her way home, she feels her hand shaking and realizes that a monster is nearby. She looks around and finds a man staring intently at her. She begins to run, but the man chases her into an apartment complex. Sang-un manages to lock the man in the complex. The man is curious and asks how she's able to sense him. She sensed him as the bus driver years ago, and now she can still do so. She ignores his questions and only wants to know why he's desperate to kill her. He reveals that he can remember the smell of her soul and warns her that other monsters are also looking for her. Meanwhile, H-Wall gets an update that a monster named Yi-Yong has been released from prison, so he goes in search of it. Yi-Yong is released from prison, but on his way to his apartment, a young boy confronts him and accuses him of killing a friend. Since the boy is alone, Yi-Yong beats him to unconsciousness and hides him in the booth of his car. As he's about to drive off, H-Wall stops and questions him. Yi-Yong is a reincarnated monster that can smell Sang-un's soul. So H-Wall beats him up and takes him to Sang-un's former apartment. The man is able to smell remnants of the girl's soul in the house, which helps H-Wall confirm that the girl had really come to the house. As he looks around, he finds a hair bangle on the side of the broken wall. When he smells it, his monster instincts make him discover that the girl works in a laundry factory. Yi-Yong sneaks from behind to stab him, but he stops him just in time and kills him. Then, he goes to visit his private detective and gives him the lead on where to find the girl. The detective then calls a friend for assistance in the case. The friend is Kwon. The detective invites Kwon and shows him a picture of Sang-un. Kwon immediately recognizes the girl because he was the detective that handled her mother and sister murder case. He becomes worried about her and remembers that she had told him that a Bulgasal is after her life. H-Wall takes over Yi-Yong's car and drives home. While in the car, he hears a noise from the booth and goes to open it. He's shocked to find a young schoolboy trapped in the booth. The boy mistakes him for a kidnapper and stabs him with a knife. As soon as he realizes his mistake, he offers to call an ambulance to treat H-Wall's wound, but H-Wall instructs him to get lost. He receives a call from the detective, who informs him that they have found the laundry factory she works at. So he drives off in the car. Meanwhile, Sang-un is worried about her sister and tries to contact her, but the phone number is unavailable. So she meets a fellow worker and proposes for them to switch shifts. She wants to work a late-night shift so that she can spend the day searching for her sister. But then she receives a call from her sister and goes out to answer it. At the same time, H-Wall goes to a laundry factory and shows her pictures to security. The man tells him she doesn't work in the factory and directs him to another factory nearby. So he goes to check it out. Sang-un co-workers finish their work for the day and bid her goodbye. She's the only one in the company taking a night shift. H-Wall arrives at her factory and shows her pictures to security. The security refuses to give out information about the staff, but H-Wall bribes him and gets her address. He gets inside his car and instructs the private detective to visit her address to confirm if she lives there. But as he prepares to leave, he sees that a worker has thrown over a pile of bed sheets, so he goes to help. Sang-un had her face covered, so he didn't recognize her as the woman he was searching for. He helped her carry the bed into the factory. She's grateful for his help and offers him a drink as gratitude. When she sees a stab in his chest, she offers to call the ambulance, but he turns her down and leaves the factory. While leaving, the detective calls to inform him that no one lives at the address. H-Wall is confused and begins to think deeply. He then remembers that he had seen a red bangle on the hands of the female worker at the factory. It resembles the one he found at their home. This thought makes him realize that the female worker he met earlier was Sang-un, so he immediately drives back to the factory. Meanwhile, Sang-un is closed for the day. As she prepares to leave, she feels her hands shaking and immediately knows there is a monster nearby. She tries to run away, but the monster begins to chase her. He catches up with her and tries to kill her, but at that moment, she gets a vision of the Bulgasal. This gives her the strength to fight him off, but he overpowers and tries to kill her again. H-Wall stops the knife from behind her with his hand. He gets into a fight with the monster and gains the upper hand. The monster realizes he'll lose if he continues fighting, so he runs away. H-Wall tries to chase him, but Sang-un stops him. She's concerned about his injuries and thanks him for saving her. When she tries to touch the cut on his face, he holds her hands to stop her. With her face up close, he's suddenly reminded of the night she had killed his family, so he contemplates whether to kill her and get revenge. But at that moment, Sang-un's junior sister, Jai-ho, visits the factory and sees the scene of H-Wall holding Sang-un. When Hwal sees Jai-ho, he's shocked to realize she has his late wife's face. He becomes conflicted on whether to kill Sang-un. Jai-ho finds him strange, but Sang-un runs up to her before bidding goodbye to Hwal. When they get home, Sang-un begins to make plans to move to another city to hide from the monsters, but Jai-ho becomes angry and reveals she feels tired of traveling from one city to another. She also reveals she's pregnant, and since her boyfriend had refused to take responsibility, she intends to find a stable to provide for the child. Meanwhile, Hwal feels confused and conflicted after seeing his wife's reincarnation. He remembers the old seer telling him that he would always come in contact with members of his family because he had dragged them into his bad karma. All these thoughts flash his mind, and he gets into a car accident. A woman finds and drags him into her vehicle. When he wakes up, she tells him it's delivery day and drives to his house. He then informs her that he had found the Sang-un. It turns out that the woman is Hai-suk, the reincarnation of the old seer. They get to his house, and she stocks his fridge with animal blood. He then tells his plan to catch Sang-un and retrieve his stolen soul. When he retrieves his soul, Sang-un will naturally return to her original Bulgasal form, so he intends to lock her up in a cave. Once he retrieves his soul, the monsters will change their target to him, so he plans on either running away or dying honorably as a human. After the woman leaves, he hears a sound in his house and goes to check it out. To his surprise, the young boy he saved had somehow gotten into his house. The boy's name is Do-yun. He claims he was worried about Hwal's injuries and had sneaked into the house to wait for Hwal's return. Hwal orders the boy to leave the house, but he insists on staying, so Hwal grabs him by the neck to scare him. The boy then reveals he's an orphan with nowhere else to go. He's also scared that Yi-yong will return for him, so he begs to live with Hwal. Hwal decides to tie up the boy and lock him in a room. Meanwhile, the monster gets home and treats the wounds from his fight with Hwal. A man walks into the room and asks if he had succeeded in killing Sang-un. The man instructs the monster to catch her before Hwal gets to her. On the other hand, Kwon decides to work for the private detective on the condition that he's given Hwal's phone number. When he dials the number, Do-yun picks up the call. He had been tied up in the room and was looking for a way to escape. Do-yun informs Kwon that no one was at home, but Kwon deceives the boy to send Hwal's home address. Then he visits the house and finds the boy tied up. But he doesn't untie him, instead he pushes the boy aside and searches around the house. He finds a photo of Sang-un in the drawer and suspects that Hwal was behind the death of Yeon and their mother. He also sees Sang-un's address in the drawer, so he takes Do-yun along to meet Sang-un. Meanwhile, Sang-un tells Jai-ho she's going out for a while to get information on the sword that can kill a Bulgasal. So Jai-ho is left alone at home. She hears the door unlocking and some sneaking into the house. When she tries to call the police, Hwal appears from behind and covers her mouth. A monster had gotten into the house and was searching around for her, but when it felt the presence of Hwal, it ran away. Jai-ho recognizes Hwal as the man who had saved her sister, but before she could talk to him, he runs away to chase after the monster. Kwon arrives at the address to see Hwal chasing a man. The monster runs into an abandoned factory and challenges Hwal to a fight. After receiving several blows from Hwal, the monster brings out a lighter and triggers the fire alarm. Water begins to pour on him. It turns out he's a monster that gets stronger with water. They begin to fight again, but this time, the monster gains the upper hand. He strangles Hwal with a rope and thinks the fight is over. He begins to rejoice and talks about celebrating with his master. But unknown to him, Hwal isn't dead. He overheard everything and realizes that the monster was working together with a person. Hwal stands on his feet and questions the monster. So the monster reveals he's working together with a man with a dark hole on his chest. Hwal inquires about the dark hole, but the monster refuses to give out more information. So he grabs the monster by the neck and tries to strangle him. Kwon walks in to see this scene and runs to stop him. When Hwal sees Kwon's face, he's reminded of the general. He becomes conflicted and runs away from the factory. Kwon goes to check up on the monster, but the man lies that Hwal is on his way to kill Sang-un and that they need to stop him. Hwal runs to his car and makes a phone call to the personal guard he assigned to Sang-un. The man informs him that Sang-un was visiting a nursing home. As he updates Hwal on the girl's whereabouts, a strange man approaches and kills him. Hwal notices that the personal guard has stopped speaking. He immediately knew something was wrong, so he quickly drives to the nursing home. Sang-un is at the nursing home to visit Go-bun. Before parting ways, Go-bun had told her to forget about fighting the Bulgasal, but the situation was now urgent, so she visits to ask about the sword. She begs the woman for information, but the woman yells for her to leave. Go-bun still blames her for the death of Yon and wants her to leave. The nurses arrive to calm the situation, but while leaving, the woman tells her that only a Bulgasal can kill a Bulgasal. After the experience with H-Wall and the monster, Jai-ho calls Sang-un to inform her of the situation. Sang-un becomes worried and advises her to hide in a motel. As she rushes to meet her sister, a young man in a car stops her and introduces himself as her insurance agent. He tries to talk to her, but she turns him down and says she's in a hurry to go somewhere. So the man proposes to drop her with his car. As she contemplates getting into the car, she sees a blood stain on his shirt and suspects that he's a monster. She begins to run, but he gets out of the car to chase her. She runs into a small forest to hide. As he searches for her, she turns back and runs into his empty car in an attempt to drive away. But he catches up with her and breaks the car window. He shows her a dark hole on his chest and is determined to kill her for being responsible for the hole. As he pulls out his sword to kill her, H-Wall ramps into him with a car. Sang-un spots H-Wall coming out of the car and runs away to escape from him. But H-Wall finds her in a tunnel. She's with a sword and hides it behind her. As he approaches her, she questions him on why he wants to kill her. H-Wall realizes that she has no memory of the past lives and that only one of the twins had the memory. When he approaches, she stabs him with the sword she had taken from the strange man's car. She accuses him of killing her family, but he grabs her neck and tries to strangle her. He remembers the night of her sister's death. He was actually outside the house when the mother returned with Sang-un. As he waited outside, he heard a scream from the house and went to find out. But when he arrived at the scene, he saw a man on black running away. He walked over and saw Sang-yeon bleeding beside her dead mother. It was at this moment that Sang-un came out of the wardrobe and saw him, so she thought he was the Bulgasal monster that killed her family. Meanwhile, Kwon, Do-yeon, and the monster are driving to find Sang-un. The monster uses the smell of her soul to track them down. When they arrive in front of the nursing home, the monster betrays Kwon and tries to strangle him. Do-yeon can't do anything because he's still tied up. Kwon struggles to control the car steering, but the rope on his neck causes him to lose control, so they get into an accident. When he wakes up, the monster is no longer in the car. He checks up on Do-yeon to confirm he's okay before leaving the car. As he searches around for the monster, he sees a Bulgasal eating the dead body of the monster. This scene causes him to fall unconscious. Yul-T is also a Bulgasal like H-Wall. He had been working together with the monster to find and kill Sang-un. After eating the monster, he goes out to search for Sang-un. When they hear his beastly sound, both H-Wall and Sang-un realizes that there's another Bulgasal. H-Wall advises her to run in the other direction while he waits and fights the Bulgasal. Yul-T walks into the tunnel and introduces himself as another Bulgasal. H-Wall asks about his identity, and he claims to be older than H-Wall. They begin to fight each other. Yul-T easily overpowers H-Wall. He reveals that the reason H-Wall is weaker is because he feeds on animal blood instead of human blood. He also reveals that Sang-un is on her last reincarnation, so he's on a mission to kill her and put an end to her existence. He then stabs H-Wall with a sword and goes to find Sang-un. He chases and catches up to her. Before killing her, he reveals he's only taking revenge on her for what she did to him in her past life. He pulls out a dagger to kill her. At that moment, she suddenly remembers the last sentence her sister had told her that night. Her sister had told her that the only way to kill a Bulgasal was to find a man with a scar on his hand. The man is the sword that can kill a Bulgasal. She then realizes that H-Wall had a scar on his hand. As Yul-T raises the dagger to destroy her soul, blood begins to sip out of the hole on his black chest. The pain stops him from destroying her soul. He's frustrated that he can't destroy her soul, so he strangles her neck to kill her. But H-Wall stabs him with a sword, so he decides to run away. H-Wall walks up to the girl and holds her in his arms. When she opens her eyes to see him, she asks for his help to kill Bulgasal and reveals that her sister had instructed her to find him since he can help them defeat the Bulgasal. She begs him to help her before falling unconscious in his arms. He carries her out of the forest. He sees Do-yeon and asks about Kwon. They find Kwon unconscious nearby and call 911. Before leaving, H-Wall covers Kwon with his jacket to prevent him from catching cold. The police arrive at the location and find Kwon. The moment he opens his eyes, he looks around to find the Bulgasal, but there's no trace of him. Even evidence of an accident had been removed. The police reveal that he is the only one they found in the forest, and there was no sign of an accident. H-Wall, on the other hand, takes Sang-un to his house and locks her up in a room. As she sleeps, she dreams of her sister warning her about the monster with a hole on his chest. She wakes up to find herself in a room with H-Wall. He begins to question her on the reason Yul-T wants her dead, but she has no idea why. Since her sister had instructed her to find H-Wall for help, she begins to beg him to help her kill Yul-T. But this angers H-Wall because he had spent his entire life plotting revenge on her, yet she's begging him to help her. He also doesn't know if she's putting on an act. She asks to see her junior sister, but H-Wall locks her up in a room and says she'll never see her sister again. Meanwhile, Jae-ho is in a motel and is trying to contact Sang-un. She hears a knock on the door and thinks it's a monster. When she opens it, she sees a woman and immediately traps her head in between the door. But the woman quickly introduces herself as Hae-suk. She was sent by H-Wall to take Jae-ho to safety. As they get into a car to leave, a hairy man watches them from afar. Kwon is at the police station. He tries to explain that he had seen a monster before falling unconscious, but the officers do not believe him. He becomes frustrated and causes a ruckus. Detective Ham comes in and stops him from further embarrassing himself. They go out to talk and Kwon reveals he had found the missing twin from their case 15 years ago. He begs the detective to reopen the case and catch the perpetrator of the murder. He also tells the detective about the monster he had seen. The detective doesn't believe him, so he promises to provide enough evidence to arrest H-Wall. Sang-un is alone in the locked room and is looking for a way to escape. She sees a chair and removes an iron rod from it. Then, she hides it inside her clothes. When H-Wall comes to give her food, she begs him to let her use the toilet. As soon as he closes the door, she leaves the tap running and tries to open the window of the toilet. H-Wall catches her in the process and breaks her rod. She begs him to allow her to meet Jae-ho, but he says he'll only let her go if she tells him everything she knows. So she tells him everything. A Bulgasal had killed her family and is now after her soul. The only way to destroy the Bulgasal is by using H-Wall as a sword. H-Wall finds it hard to believe her. He thinks she had intentionally split her soul into two twins to make his life miserable. He also believes she's pretending to be innocent. At that same time, he receives a phone call from Yul-T. The man requests a meetup at a hotel, so H-Wall instructs Do-Yun to look over Sang-un in the locked room. He warns the boy never to open the door because she's a murderer that had killed his family. He goes to meet Yul-T at a fancy restaurant. Yul-T proposes for them to be friends, but H-Wall sees through his intentions and tells him to go straight to the point. Yul-T then reveals they're supposed to work together to destroy the girl since she's a common enemy. He also reveals that he knows what the girl had done to his family. H-Wall is curious and wants to know how Yul-T got the information on his family. But Yul-T reveals more details. He claims to know why the woman had cursed him from birth and why she chose to take his soul. Yul-T promises to give an answer to all of H-Wall's questions if he helps to kill Sang-un. But H-Wall is curious as to why Yul-T needs help to kill the girl. Yul-T opens up his clothes and shows H-Wall a dark hole on his chest. He claims that the girl had cursed him with the hole and that nothing can heal the hole. He had suffered thousands of years with the pain in his heart, and the pain can only go away if he permanently destroys her soul. Since a human can only reincarnate 8 times, he had destroyed her soul 7 times already, and if he destroys her soul for the last time, she'll cease to exist forever and the hole on his chest would be gone. But for some reason, he found out that he can't kill her for the 8th time. Each time he tries to do it, blood sips out from the hole. He believes the twin sister, Yeon, had done something, so he wants H-Wall to be the one to destroy the girl. H-Wall rejects the offer to destroy her soul. He claims the soul in her body belongs to him and he wants it back to become human. As he stands to leave, Yul-T stabs him with a fork and threatens to kill him if he doesn't bring the girl over. Meanwhile, Sang-un hears Do-Yun footsteps around the house and begs him to open the door. She claims to want to meet her sister, but Do-Yun says he can't open the door because H-Wall had instructed him to never open the door. Sang-un keeps begging and banging the door. Someone knocks at the front door, and when Do-yeon opens it, he sees Kwon. Kwon enters the house and is looking for H-Wall. Do-yeon tries to make him leave, but the man hears someone calling for help and knocks down the door. He's shocked to see Sang-un in the locked room and tries to introduce himself as the detective who took over her mother and sister case 15 years ago. She remembers him but pretends not to. H-Wall arrives at this moment and sees Kwon in his house. When Kwon sees him, he becomes angry at him for abducting and locking Sang-un. He proceeds to fight him, but H-Wall invades his blows. H-Wall tries to explain that Sang-un had killed his family, but Kwon thinks he had taken drugs and doesn't believe him. The man continues to fight, so H-Wall retaliates and grabs his neck to strangle him, but he remembers the general and stops. He begs Kwon to leave the house, but the man insists on fighting him to the end, so Sang-un intervenes and tells Kwon that H-Wall was only trying to help her. H-Wall goes out to enter his car, but before joining him, Sang-un advises Kwon not to interfere with them. They drive away, leaving the Kwon with Do-yeon, but Kwon decides to tail them. While driving, Sang-un begs H-Wall to let her meet Jae-ho, but he tells her that Jae-ho could be in danger if they meet. When he reassures her that Jae-ho is safe, she decides to trust him. She begs him again to help her destroy Yul-T, but H-Wall is conflicted because Yul-T had told the girl cannot be trusted. Meanwhile, Jae-ho is trying to call Sang-un, but the number is unavailable. She looks around Hae-suk's house and finds a photo of H-Wall and Hae-suk. She then realizes that H-Wall is an immortal monster. She wants to find her sister, so when Hae-suk leaves the house, she sneaks out. Hae-suk returns and can't find her around. H-Wall drives Sang-un to a forest and tells her to follow him to a mountain. She soon gets tired from the long walk, so he leaves her behind and continues ahead. When he gets to a well, he receives a phone call from Yul-T. Their plan was for H-Wall to drive the girl to Yul-T's place, but H-Wall had a change of mind. Yul-T tries to convince him to destroy the girl's soul. According to him, H-Wall would become very powerful once the soul in the girl is destroyed. But H-Wall doesn't want that. All he wants is to retrieve his stolen soul. Yul-T becomes disappointed and promises to take revenge on H-Wall for going against their plan. Sang-un finally catches up with H-Wall in the room. He shows her the well and reveals that he built it to imprison the person who killed his family. She's curious and asks about the culprit, but H-Wall tells her that a Bulgasal had done it. He then reveals to her that she was once a Bulgasal and was responsible for the death of his family. She's shocked to hear this and doesn't believe him, so he grabs her neck and pulls out a dagger to kill her and retrieve his soul. At this moment, Hae-suk runs into the room and announces that Jae-ho is missing. Since Jae-ho was a reincarnation of his wife, H-Wall becomes distracted and worries about her. He gives his phone to Sang-un to dial Jae-ho's number. Someone picks up the phone and instructs her to go to a certain location to find Jae-ho. H-Wall decides to drive Sang-un to the location, but on their way, Kwon stops them and goes over to check up on Sang-un. But Sang-un is in a hurry to save her sister, so gets down from H-Wall's car and asks to borrow Kwon's car. H-Wall tries to stop her, but she doesn't believe him since he had tried to kill her some minutes ago. The girl drives away to the location, so H-Wall decides to drive to the location with Kwon. Sang-un arrives at the location close to the river, but she can't find her sister. She sees a boat far away and tries to swim towards it, but H-Wall jumps into the river to prevent her from drowning. Sang-un is extremely worried about her sister. As she breaks down in heart, H-Wall receives a Yul-T. Yul-T tells him that the only way to save Jae-ho is to bring Sang-un to him. Sang-un overhears the conversation and begs H-Wall to take her to Yul-T. She's ready to sacrifice herself to keep her sister safe. But H-Wall rejects this plan. He promises to save Jae-ho and asks her to trust him. As they contemplate how to rescue the sister, they see the monster going out of the water. H-Wall chases after him, but the monster escapes and drives Jae-ho away. H-Wall, Sang-un, and Kwon team up to find Jae-ho. H-Wall remembers the monster from his past. The monster is obsessed with water and likes to dislocate his victim's leg before drowning them. H-Wall tells Kwon to investigate any reservoir with a case where a victim drowned with a dislocated leg. So Kwon visits the police station and bribes Detective Ham to give him information. The detective tells him that there's a reservoir where a girl was found drowning with a dislocated leg. They gather together again in H-Wall's house, and Kwon tells them about his findings. H-Wall drives Sang-un to the reservoir. He gives her a dagger to protect herself. But when they get to the building, they find it locked with chains. A security man tells them that the building is off limits, but Sang-un feels her hand shaking and knows that the monster is inside. She informs H-Wall, so he breaks the chain and gets in. He begins to chase the monster and gets to a pool. The monster jumps into the pool and changes into its true form. Kwon arrives at the pool too and is shocked to see the creators. He gets distracted, so the monster pulls and injures his hand. H-Wall catches the monster in time and tries to strangle it to death, but he gets distracted by Kwon's scream because it reminds him of the general. As he goes to check up on Kwon, the monster escapes. Meanwhile, Sang-un searches all the rooms in the building for Jae-ho. She finds her tied sister in a room and unties her, but the monster finds the two of them and tries to Sang-un. They manage to escape, but Sang-un realizes she's a danger to her sister, so she tells her sister to escape through an elevator while she looks for other ways to escape. As she finds her way around the building, she enters a room with a pool and notices some movements in the pool. The monster pulls her into the pool, but H-Wall jumps in to save her. She's able to escape from the pool, but H-Wall is stuck inside fighting the monster. The monster is very powerful when inside a water, so it overpowers H-Wall. Meanwhile, Jae-ho returns to find Sang-un beside the pool. She tells Sang-un to run away, but Sang-un is worried about H-Wall. Jae-ho then reveals that she had touched H-Wall and saw a vision of his past. She tells her sister that H-Wall is dangerous and begs her to escape. H-Wall continues to fight the monster, and they end up killing each other. As H-Wall drowns into the pool, Sang-un jumps in to save him. But when they pull him out, he's lifeless. If you liked this recap, comment Bulgasal Immortal Soul for another part. Please subscribe and watch this video.